So, when it comes to retro gaming, most people think of the old style games from many years past that was played on the Atari, the N64, and stuff like that, which in the gaming industry is absolutely true. We are using those examples today, but we're also, retro gaming also has a stylization aspect of it. Because I know modern games use retro style in order to promote themselves, to make themselves more abstract, make themselves more, try to stand out, but since everybody's doing it, it's not really a good thing. So, I don't really know where I was going with this. Just kind of,
Retro games being a stylistic choice. Oxford Dictionary defines retro as, what was it exactly?
It was design and stylization from a time recent past. So even these modern games have the large retro styles. Okay? Here we go.
Okay, so we are fighting for the side of modern gaming, obviously. We believe that through the advancement of technology, game developing technology, and the ability to learn from past mistakes, it's only natural that graphics, game mechanics, storylines, and the entertainment of games in general have improved, because everything improves with time. So being able to make use of modern technology in games is a massive advantage over retro gaming. And that's my opening.
Should I drop the heat seeker?
Yeah.
All right. Remember that we are in fact arguing modern gaming versus retro gaming. And while the definition for retro and retro gaming are different, we are arguing retro gaming versus modern gaming. And the definition for retro gaming is retro gaming, also known as classic gaming or old school gaming, in the playing or collecting of older personal computer consoles, arcade video games, or contemporary titles. So, you know.
Where?
Well, to start off with our 4 points, we have arcade games. They're a quick play kind of style with insert a quarter and you're already playing. These games were massively popular for the time, with a lot of arcade titles being ported onto consoles quite quickly. Popular titles include things such as Guitar Hero, Street Fighter, Dance Dance Revolution. The list goes on and on, but we don't have time to get through every item. Anything?
And with the early console gaming is where they had the true, since we were just starting out, they didn't know exactly where they were going, so they had the freedom to experiment, to see if this would work and this would work, and they found formulas that would work and grew from there. So let's go with Mario. The classic Mario still holds up today. Everybody loves playing that. Same with the Mega Mans. All the Mega Man series, all like the Castlevanias. People still love playing those stuff today, because back then they were just freeballing it, didn't know that they were doing it, and it did. So all that kind of stuff is still lovable and still good to go.
Mega Man in particular shows that they kept the arcade styling in the first game and dropped it immediately when it didn't work, because they had a scoring system which the game did not need. It was completely superfluous. After that, they did away with it and went on with their simple beat 8 bosses, go through 4 more stages, and win the game. Earlier console games were more along the lines of just a simple Pong. Nice and easy, anyone can play it, anyone can pick it up. Play for hours, depending on how into it you get. Space Invaders. People love to play Space Invaders even still. It's a nice, simple game. Shoot things as they come down. I mean, it might not be a huge, 80-hour time waster, but, you know, you throw 15 minutes into the game every once in a while, you're fine. As for the Crash that people are familiar with in the, you know, ET era of games, that was not so much to blame a few retro games. Europe and Japan didn't experience that crash at all. Europe in particular had stuff like the Magnavox, the ColecoVision, and television that's just kept the gaming running, and yeah.
Move over to this side.
Okay, so obviously, the biggest point, well, not the biggest point, but graphics have obviously majorly improved since retro gaming. I recall playing an old game on Sega, I think it was Jurassic Park or something like that, and I remember thinking that how cool it would be to see the game in 3D, in 3 dimensions, be able to look all the way around and just have a view from the back of the character instead of just a side scroller. No one's sitting around playing Grand Theft Auto 5 thinking, man, I wish this was in 2D, right? So obviously, with the advancement of technology, graphics, lighting, everything looks better. Other than that, we've had time to learn from the mistakes of retro gaming, so there's things that we can do now with modern technology that they couldn't do before. Like, for instance, let's say Pong. If there was a bug in the game, they're not gonna send someone to your house to fix it. Once you bought the game, if it's broken, that's the game you're playing. But these days, if there's a bug in the game, they can just patch it online and it's fixed, so.
So, quick rebuttal to what you guys said about Mega Man. So, Mega Man didn't work, and they immediately changed it because it was built for arcades when you can't run an arcade game inside of a home. So, when they changed the game to make it more suitable for audiences, that's the exact same thing that happened with retro gaming. They changed it and made it better, and it became modern gaming. Also, aside from the visuals, one of the major gameplay changes to current release games is the addition of multiplayer. Now, I already gave like a huge spiel one time about why I love multiplayer games and like how much they mean to me, but realistically speaking, multiplayer games can stand on their own 2 feet. You don't need a single player anymore. Not that I don't love single player. But Star Wars Battlefront came out like a couple of months ago and it sold just over 15 million copies. That's better than pretty much most of retro gaming. So now my question is, why would a game that sold so much based only on multiplayer be anything less than a retro game when it could add a single player and only be more? No? Do you have... No? Okay, I'll go more then. Multiplayer games are pretty much virtually impossible on retro consoles, with the exception of some games being able to play with others. Wireless connectivity wouldn't become a thing until way later down the road in the 1990s, and by then retro gaming had already ended. Esports and media are a huge thing. Have you ever heard of games Super Smash Bros., Halo, COD, Dota, League of Legends? If you're looking for something that all those games have in common, it's a competitive scene. People can play those games professionally. And in the case of some esports, they're multi-million-dollar industries.
All right, time for the open debate.
Alright, I'll start this off. Going to your opening statement about Battlefront, I believe that one of the reasons why it sold so much is because of the nostalgia factor that it comes with retro gaming. Because back in the day, when there was Battlefront 2, that was a big, yes, it did have multiplayer aspect, but if you played it, it had 32 versus 32 on a retro gaming. Big, gigantic space battles, foot battles and forces on Hoth, stuff like that. And people were remembering this, like, oh, it's going to come out. We're going to play this game again. But it didn't live up to the hype. Personally, in my opinion, because I played it myself, and I didn't like it because it didn't live up to the hype of what it was in the retro gaming. There's some producers these days use the names of the old games in order to sell the new games for the nostalgia factor.
Alright, so you bring up nostalgia.
Yeah.
Say you took someone who's never played a video game before. They have no opinion on the matter whatsoever. You sit them down, you get them to play a new game, and you get them to play a really old game. And you ask them which one's better. Obviously, they're going to say the new game is better.
It depends on which game you play, because there's some newer games that aren't very good. They're crap, like in my opinion. Goat Simulator, I hate that game. I think it sucks.
Pretty good game, dude.
It's a stupid. I don't see the point in it, but I won't get into that argument. It's a completely different argument on its own. Anyway, exactly. And it all depends on the quality of the game. If you have them play a good game from a modern game and a bad game, a retro game, obviously they're going to pick the better game, because that's just it is. So that's not really a good argument to
So
go
you
for.
play a good game from both eras then?
So exactly. So
I've
That
sat
would-
down with my grandmother, and we've played some Assassin's Creed. She didn't understand how any of it worked.
Did you explain it to her?
Yes, thoroughly. There's too many buttons for some people to comprehend how modern gaming functions. That's why the Wii was a hit for non-gamers. The point, though, is that things can be confusing regardless of how simple they are. E.T., for example. There is no direction
we don't
with
need to
how that
bring
works.
it up.
Yeah.
Again, though, when I'm talking about Mega Man 1 having the superfluous arcade function, the point of that was superfluous. Extra, it didn't need to be there. It didn't hinder the game at all. It just didn't need to be there. Like a lot of modern multiplayer games, don't need to have a single player campaign, or they don't need to have multiplayer. At what point do you consider things retro? That's subjective, because would you not consider Nintendo 64 to be retro at this point? Is that not an old thing that you're nostalgic for? Yes. GameCube even is retro.
It's starting to be considered a retro game. It's starting to get into that era.
It's something you grew up with. It's retro.
Okay, obviously this whole argument is based on personal preferences,
Absolutely.
but, but
Not right.
there's a reason that they don't sell these types of games anymore in the mainstream. It's indie developers that are making them.
Actually, they do. They just make it work on the older games. And I know what the rebuttal with that is, making it modern, but it's still the retro game, and it's still there. It's still the Mario, just being able to play and being able to be passed forward.
Case in points, NES Remix.
All right, great open debate, you guys, and back to you for the conclusion.
So generally, without the retro gaming, basically your modern gaming wouldn't have a place to start. You guys wouldn't have had a place to grow or to expand upon. If you guys would have started in this era, you guys would technically be the retro games at this point. So without the retro games, you wouldn't have modern gaming today.
You'd be far too experimental and not have any idea what to do with all the capabilities that you have now.
Just like the retro games. So you can't really say that they're bad because you needed them in order for you guys to grow.
So, in this debate in particular, you really have to turn off your nostalgia, because when you try and argue against something from your childhood, it's really difficult. But if you think about trying to tell people like why you have fond memories of retro gaming, it's like what song made you love music. But there's one thing you really can't deny, it's money in the mainstream, baby. Think about it. Whether you like the mainstream or not, gaming is part of it now. You guys can't argue that the beta of a game is probably going to be inferior to the full release. And you guys were the alpha test. We're the full release now.
Oh.
Now, with more games coming out each year, and console sellers like Mario and Sonic, especially Sonic, getting shelved along with all the older stuff and making way for the new stuff, you know, video games, graphics and gameplay, all of it together, like a fine wine, only get better with age.
Nice, right in time. Great.